Welcome back to I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Damon Lembi. Damon is a two-time best-selling author and the CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has upskilled over 2 million people. I recommend you check that out. And he's also the host of a great podcast, the Learn It All podcast. We got to hang out there together recently. And it's always great when two hosts are together in one show. Damon, welcome. How are you?
Joe, it's great seeing you again, and I'm honored for being here. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew that real growth only occurs outside of your comfort zone. And to do so, you have to be curious. And this goes for both organizations and individuals.
Okay, so a willingness to risk, a willingness to fail, a willingness to learn. And I want to share with you a quote here from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who said this, and it really struck me, and I want to get your reaction to it. He said, if you take two kids at school, one of them has more innate capability and is a know-it-all. The other has less innate capability, but is a learn-it-all. The learn-it-all always does better than the know-it-all. It seems to me that there's a case to be made here as well for leaders as learners. Make that case for us.
Well, I'm a big believer, and you probably heard this say, but great leaders aren't born or made. They're constantly in the making. And if you come across with a know-it-all mentality and you're not curious at all, and you have it all figured out, you're not going to be relevant for very long, because with the rapid pace of change and how everything is going, great leaders know that there's always more to learn, and they need to be humble enough to put themselves out there and realize that they don't have all the answers and they got to find ways to get them.
For many leaders, the pressure to appear confident and decisive, to basically be a know-it-all, it makes it harder for them to ask questions, to be a learner, and to be in that learning mode. What can leaders do to cultivate this curiosity, this learning mindset, in spite of the perceived risks?
Well, you and I are both hosts, right? And we've interviewed hundreds of great leaders. And the best leaders I've ever interviewed are humble and aren't afraid to be vulnerable, but they do it in a way that they're also confident. And so it's totally fine to say, I don't know. I don't have the answer to something, but also have a game plan for how you're going to figure that out, whether it's by surrounding yourself with great people who can help get you that answer, or say to whoever it is, look, I'll come back to you in 3 days with that answer. I believe that being humble and vulnerable actually helps you build trust within organizations with other leaders.
Yeah, trust is the currency of leadership, difficult to earn and very easy to spend. I'm wondering about this notion of continuous learning. Within organizations, what are sort of the greatest barriers, the greatest blockers that inhibit leaders from fostering curiosity other than their own self-doubts?
There's a great line I once heard that learning without doing is treason. So you have to take what you've learned and apply it and execute it. It all starts off at the top. The leaders, the C-level and senior level leaders, need to model the behavior that they want the rest of their organization to do, right? So that starts with trying things. And by doing that, I think it allows a psychologically safe space for the rest of the organization to feel like, hey, my team, my leaders have my back, so I can try things and I'm not going to be punished or reprimanded if I make mistakes. Now, I mean, there's different levels of mistakes that can be made. We all know that. The difference between somebody who's a surgeon and them making a mistake and somebody making a mistake maybe on a product release. But I think you need to cultivate a culture where people feel comfortable asking questions, being curious, especially these days with AI. I think every question should be, what is a better way to do this? And how can AI help me even enhance what we're doing?
When we were together on your show, we talked about the work of Charles Bosk and how when he studied the success rates of neurosurgeons in their training programs, the ones that actually made it through were not the ones with the strongest backgrounds, the most talent, the best training. They were the ones who actually reflected on their mistakes and turned those mistakes into learning moments. And I feel like if leaders do the same thing, where they normalize failure and approach with curiosity and a learner's mindset, they can probably do the same.
I always tell people, you got to find ways to be comfortable with failure. Be comfortable with people saying no to you when you're out there, if you're in sales, making mistakes. I think a lot of times done is better than perfect. And you got to get comfortable with that, right? And because not everything is going to go in a linear format. And I think the best leaders do. And I like what you said right there, because you got to have self-awareness too, right? To be able to say to yourself, hey, this is how I'm going to try to go about something. If it doesn't work, I'm going to learn from it. And like you always talk about with feedback, feedback is fuel for learning and growth.
For too many organizations, there's short-term pressures that are interfering with long-term thinking. What can they do to balance the short-term demands against the long-term space that's needed for learning?
I think one thing that they can do that I found is carve out spaces for people to try things and test, like in a sandbox, right? And if it fails, at least you could learn from there. I like to call it purposeful awfulizing. So a lot of times people always want to look at it from a very positive perspective, like what's the best case? I think you should look at it like absolute worst case. And if it's something you can't survive, then obviously it shouldn't be something that you're gambling on completely. So find a safe space in a sandbox and give people the opportunity to try and innovate and get curious there.
Yeah, Amy Edmondson was here not too long ago talking about intelligent failures. What are some of the small incremental changes and tests that we can make in the way that we produce our products or lead our people that might in the moment seem very high risk, but they're actually the perfect approaches for testing new ideas and new practices because they're sized just right so that even if it does go wrong, you still have a good outcome.
Yeah, you could overcome it. And one thing I like to say about mistakes is I'm totally fine with people making mistakes, right? I just want them to make new mistakes. Don't continue to make the same mistake over and over, because if you continue to make the same mistake, it obviously means you're not self-aware and you're not learning. So I think mistakes are great fuel for growth, and just continue to learn how to make different mistakes.
Would you say that this really all starts with leaders setting the tone, setting the conditions for normalizing risk-taking in the workplace, or does it require a certain confidence, a certain courage among individual contributors so that they can begin to take those steps and then receive the support from leadership when they need it?
I found it starts with leadership, 100%. And I say that because I've got friends, people I mentor, and even see in some of our customers where it's the type of organization where if people make mistakes, they're going to get reprimanded. They could even lose their jobs. So everybody is, one, saying yes to whatever the executives or the CEO has to say, and they just go about doing their business, regardless of how much confidence they have as an individual. They don't want to risk losing their job by making a mistake that can cost them personally. I think great organizations where people feel like they have an opportunity to be curious and to innovate, and they have the support and feel like their leaders have their back, that will help generate the confidence that they need to go out and try things. And not only try things, but they actually take accountability. People aren't pointing fingers. They own up to it and say, "Hey, look, this one's on me. I'm going to figure out how to make it better next time."
Mm-hmm. You're a baseball player. You played college, right? D1?
In my glory days. Back in at Arizona State back in the 90s.
So you know this as an athlete that you're not going to make every shot you take. You're not going to hit every pitch thrown your way. What are some lessons you've taken from the field into leading this company now, knowing that perfection isn't the goal, it's progress?
When people ask me, what's the most important skill that we need for the future? It's learning agility, the ability to learn something, unlearn, and relearn. Let's say I go up to bat and I think this guy is a great fastball pitcher, but maybe he's getting his curveball over for strikes. I strike out. Hopefully I get some feedback from my coach, right? But I got to learn on the spot, because in 15 minutes, I have to make the adjustments and figure out what I need to do to get things done and to get a hit. And even if I'm lucky, I'm still going to fail 7 out of 10 times. And that's why I think it's so great when you talk about fearless feedback. You got to just be comfortable with failure, and figure out what your definition of failure is. I don't even think it's a failure unless you just quit on something. And just
Failing
do
to
your best.
try.
The failing
Like
to try. That's what I
failing to
mean.
try.
Right? Yeah, that's when it's failure if you just give up, right? Or you don't try and get out of your comfort zone and go forward with something. So I would say what I learned most from sports is perseverance, because you're going to have quite a few failures, and learning agility, the ability to adapt, grow, and again, be curious, because you got to be curious, whether it's in sports and in business, is if you want to be able to continue to evolve.
And that's encouraging for individual contributors who may not be working in the moment in a culture where leadership encourages this sort of thing or models it. And they still have that control to stay curious and to be agile in their own learning orientation. That's still something they can do.
Right, and I think no matter what environment you're in, you should look for learning opportunities, and they don't have to be formal learning opportunities. If you are leading an organization where you really limit what people can do, and don't give them an opportunity to failure, you're going to lose great people, because nobody wants to be stuck in a box, right? If you're a talented individual, you need the opportunity to grow and learn.
His name is Damon Lembi, and I have learned a lot from him. Damon, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Joe, thanks for having me.